What happened in that court federal of Las Vegas seemed taken from a final episode written by the Rick Harrison and Austin himself. Jamal Russell, the charismatic stars, from The Price of History, they fell collapsed in front of the judge after listening a sentence that condemned them to chain perpetual for money laundering and extortion. Nobody could believe the educational television icons, guilty of leading a criminal network millionaire. What seemed one more trial against celebrities ended becoming one of the stories darker and shameful of the entertainment industry. But how these familiar faces of the price of the history, a site judicial scandal. What began as a routine investigation ended, revealing a reality as uncomfortable as unexpected. This was not a simple legal dispute, was a brutal clash between the polished image they offered to the world and what really happened after the cameras, popularity against tests, sympathy against financial crimes. Here, we are going to tell you everything they don't want that you know about this case that shook the foundations of the world of entertainment. And, if you want more stories, do not forget to give them a like, to share, and leave your opinion in comments. Subscribe, because what comes is even stronger. So prepare to enter a history that left Boki open to medium planet Rick Harrison and Austin Russell. They became two of the characters more iconic television in reality, not only for your personalities, contrasting but perfectly complementary, but also for its talent to make history something accessible and entertaining in The Price of the Story, broadcast by History Channel. They knew how to combine knowledge with the show-generating moments that today they are almost worshipped, from dribbles memorable to historical findings that captured the attention of millions of people throughout the world. But its footprint did not end there. What began as curious program about a store, employers ended up triggering a fever for collectible objects and aroused a renewed interest in popular history. Ricky and Company. No, they only shone on screen too. They turned their family business into a Las Vegas tourist monster. It was once a modest store ended being forced stop for tourists and fans, and all that was possible thanks to Harrison's commercial smell, to your encyclopedic memory, and a railroad obsession to close agreements, although that will involve leaving ethics outside counter from time to time. While some laughed at the concept of program in its beginnings, Rick worked in silence by growing your brand and your gold and silver pound shop store until reaching almost status legendary little by little. It positioned itself as one of the most admired entrepreneurs of country. Your way of negotia won their respect for the public and criticism, and his ability to convert any object in a historical lesson seemed almost magical. But of course, while television were sympathetic and cults behind the scene, the panorama, it was quite different. With the support of their popularity were launched to expand restaurants, stores, events, advertising contracts, machinery. The figures were underway. They began to grow, and also the shadows, because those activities that they generated millions of dollars too. They began to raise suspicions after boom of the program. Each of its companies followed different roads. Some worked as it should be, while others began to seem more murky. That a false currency, the famous gold and silver store, became a tourist magnet, attracting millions of visitors each year for years. They were applauded for their respectful treatment of customers and for sharing historical data with almost academic precision. That profile-friendly and educational qualification, unofficial example of entrepreneurship. American, however, while in the surface everything seemed impeccable, for below began to stir the waters. A network of little financial movements. Claros began to attract the attention of federal researchers who do not. They took to notice that something did not square. Transactions extended by several states and were carried out through a network of companies, such complex as suspect the agents, that they were still the case. They faced a bureaucratic labyrinth until Asmal but revealing piece of evidence allowed to unite points. As the months passed, the difference between what they showed in public and what happened after the scenes, it became increasingly difficult to ignore. This business is built with base on knowledge and transparency in each treatment, said Rick in initial interviews. She pitied that transparency concept seemed to have several interpretations from the Rick Harrison principle. showed disposition to cooperate with authorities, especially when first positions did not seem to play directly its commercial operations' main. Attitude gave way to a carefully calculated defense, exposed to public opinion, in place to hide or keep silent, as many do in their situation. Both Rick as a Chumley opted for what, contrary, open to the media show, his supposed good faith and give wheelspress, as if they were victims of adjudicial soap opera, insisted one and the other, once in their innocence, and at first managed to win the support of thousands of people with a narrative that positioned them as scapegoats in a crusade. Exaggerated by the government. The campaigns in social networks that demanded justice for them went viral with speed and gathered more than 1 million followers who swore for their honesty. However, while the public image remained strong, prosecutor worked silently in something much more overwhelming. A case with all letters. As prosecutors gathered more documentation, financial began to delineate what it seemed to be a criminal operation. Extremely elaborated after the facade of the famous porn business, Ricky Chumel, increasingly cornered. They began to notice that the thing was not minor misunderstandings. Researchers, they scrutinized to the slightest detail of their companies, even those of the public had never heard. Defense, knowing that pressure increased, chose to deploy a most sophisticated strategy, tried all costs disassemble the accusations, arguing that everything was technical errors and bad tax advice. But the prosecutor's office was not left impressed. It is easily devastating that when front of charges that have nothing what to do with the image that the public know us, Rick declared in an interview that sought to arouse empathy. All we can do is continue telling the truth and trusting that it is enough for a moving message. Yes, but what? He didn't cut at all what they said. Accounting books while they talked about good faith and misunderstandings. Prosecutors sharpened their arguments in the year 2022. The contrast between its reputation and accusations was simply unsustainable. They continued, counting on the support offers, but that no longer served as a shield. The case that the prosecutor's office had was forceful. More than $15 million in illegal transactions and a money laundering strategy elaborated through the entrepreneurial business all broke out when, during an audit of routine, the forensic accountant, Thomas Richards, detected too organized to be casual, according to declared at a hearing before the Congress. Financial records evidenced a clear intention of camouflage, dirty money inside channels, apparently legal. There are no doubt that this was planned, affirmed his intervention. Not only turned on the alarms, but made the media. The accounting papers became the federal scandal heart. They discovered a network of transfers that linked the porn store with a designed ghost companies series, meticulously to avoid any trail. Just a week later, prosecutors delivered a devastating report. Around 15.7 had been washed, millions of dollars using structures that went unnoticed for years. This has nothing to do with errors of calculation, firmly said the prosecutor. Maine, we are facing a plan premeditated, sustained, and executed with precision, and both defendants not only were aware, but were pieces ski to gear. Everything pointed to Rick Harrison and Austin Russell. Not only were aware of operations suspicious, but they would also have played fundamental papers in your design and execution. The cluster of tests, it was so overwhelming that the authorities, they took a long list of charges against them: conspiracy to wash money, and extortion crimes that were found guilty would take them straight to spend the rest of his days after bars. But the objective of the prosecutor's office was not limited to obtaining a condemnation, also seemed an interest very clear to disassemble piece by piece that image of impeccable entrepreneurs who'd built for years in front of cameras. Reactions in the world of entertainment were instantaneous and loaded with surprise. Some analysts, they catalogued it as one of the most cases shocking in the history of reality shows, and the documents revealed by the court left little space for doubt. Behind the store of more famous efforts in the country would have state working perfectly, organized by financial crimes. Private emails dated in 2018 revealed that several collaborators close had already detected signals from alarm. They still decided to look towards, on the other hand, the fear of sinking the brand that so many millions generated them. One of those internal messages said it no rodeos. The current structure represents a real risk of being discovered, so they chose not change. Nothing had too much at stake as to stop the machinery. Start of the trial was anything but. Quiet Rick and Chumley arrived at court surrounded by journalists, and with the pressure of knowing that everything, prosecutors were about to collapse. Their part already had an arsenal of financial documents that would expose every dark corner of its operations. Those who for years entertained millions of spectators were now sitting on the bench of the accused, listening how his legacy crumbled in the eyes of the public. What we have here is an operation perfectly structured to wash large-scale money, declared the prosecutor with a firm and hesitant tone. Described how they had built a legal facade, while millions of dollars, with more than doubtful origin, in the sala. The atmosphere became more and more dense when prosecutors began to show the more documents. Compromising, Rick gently denied, with the head visibly affected in several occasions, leaned towards his lawyer to whisper something, probably looking for an exit that already did not exist by his side. Chumley had the face unleashed, especially when talked about his alleged participation direct in the agent washing network. Miller, can you confirm whether the Lord Harrison personally signed these documents? Asked. His signature appears in all key papers. The FBI agent replied without blinking. Added that these firms were used to create ghost companies aimed at hide the origin of money. The room fell into a thick silence while the calendar of these illegal transactions being questioned about whether these structures, they required professional planning and constant maintenance. The expert foreigners, everything was planned meticulously. Rick, visibly nervous, settled his glasses while the judge in a severe voice interrupted him to get attention. Keep the composure in this S.R. Harrison room. Several accounting experts called. The system agreed by the prosecutor's office financial that had been mounted was not fruit of chance or accounting errors, but a mechanism created exclusively to hide dirty money. The doctor, Ilana E.R. Jenkins, specialist of the Georgetown University, was overwhelming. The multiple layers of transactions have no justification from any commercial point of view. Legal defense trying to turn the narrative focused his argument on the supposed technical complexity of business structures, alleged that everything was the result of having trusted blindly in financial advisors, external. Mr. Harrison has raised a legitimate business that uses dozens of people, insisted his lawyer, pointing out that the indicated fiscal structures by the prosecution, they were devised by high-level consultants. According to your version, there was never a criminal intention, only a bad administrative management. But as the trial approached his climax, the interest of the public did not do more than multiplying. The means of communication followed as if it were a Netflix blockbuster, while fans were divided by those who still they believed in their innocence and those that already they saw in all this one more than deserved. Which initially seemed a simple legal dispute had been transformed into the public collapse show of two figures that for years they represented the alleged fusion perfect between culture and commerce. Rick Harrison and Austin Russell, known to millions as the reliable faces of price of the story, were now low reflectors for very different forensic experts. They returned protagonists, money flow for years of complex financial maneuvers that do not. They had nothing casual. The figures that they came to light overcome any expectation. Around $15.7 million would have been washed through of a ghost companies whose maintenance cost more than 2.3 million. And if that already sounded murky, to add about 800,000 in systems accountants designed exclusively for camouflage. The origin of money on the day of the final verdict did not seem very different. At the end of the season of a series of cult, the courtroom was at overflow with followers, dressed in program shirts and holding signed objects, as if they expected that everything would be a misunderstanding or unexpected turn of the script. The judge, Leonard Blackwood, took its place after 8 intense audience, and atmosphere in the room froze. A silence so deep that each sheet paper seemed to resonate like thunder, while the judge reviewed the evidence, years of financial movements, undercover transfer structures, business created accurately, surgical. When he finally spoke, made without surroundings according to the conclusions of the court. The defendants had actively participated in a network sophisticated money laundering designed, with methods that clearly pointed to hide funds of illegal origin, direct mention to ghost companies, and his criminal purpose, left without words to more than one. Rick opened the eyes as if just received electric shock, while Russell lost the color of the face in the room. Families exchanged looks from panic contained. The verdict was demonitional of all charges. The judge justified the severity of the judgment when indicating the level of sophistication of the operation and the enormous confidence that the public had deposited in them for years. Rick Harrison and Austin Russell were condemned to life imprisonment with a minimum possibility of freedom, conditional. After 25 years, I also ordered the immediate confiscation of all goods related to criminal activities. The coup was brutal. After having built a media empire and be considered icons of popular knowledge and American entrepreneurship, fell from them, or humiliating way, a life imprisonment. Not only did he break his future shattered, also the narrative carefully created for years of program was like if the last scene in its history would have been written by a screenwriter of Greek tragedies. Harrison was pale while sweat began to shine in Chum's forehead. Read the judge continued, reading the failure but his words. They began to dilute between the buzz that both felt in their ears. The lawyers noticed that something was not right, and that feeling was confirmed. Seconds later, Harrison fell collapsed, and Russell wobbling. The ground almost instantly. The court. The jury was paralyzed, press officials. Everyone watched in shock as the defendants were unconscious against everyone react badly. Call emergencies. A doctor among the attendees, opening quickly towards bodies. Inert the paramedics entered running while the flashes of the cameras documented every moment. The image of Ricky Chumel being evacuated on a stretcher from the same place where had been convicted was recorded in the collective retina and of course viralized in a matter of minutes. Outside, family members exchanged hugs fast while managers of the channel history came out with their faces unleashed, escorted by personnel from. Nobody issued a word. Nobody. I knew how to react. A trial for financial crimes had just become an episode of drama global proportions. Doctor news and social networks. Justice labels exploited to pound stars and lie Bunky Chumley. They began to circulate for millions. Their actions did not wait. Some fans expressed disbelief, others appealed to theories, conspiratives, and there were no lack of those who. They believed that everything was a great curtain of smoke to cover up something even more murky. 3 days later, and even with the face visibly affected by what happened, Rick Harrison issued a statement through your lawyer, we reaffirm our innocence. We will appeal this failure, using each resource available. Wrote with his challenging tone of, always, the truth will come to light. That pauso apparently changed something in the general perception. Suddenly arose voices that had not manifested before. Some former commercial partners, who, until then they had stayed at margin, decided to break the silence. According to a source close to the environment, Las Vegas business, many people of the sector considered that the convictions, they were more disproportionate punishments, symbolic, that just although legal spokespersons took care of speaking about a possible appeal or reveal detail about the strategy to follow. Austin Russell launched a message challenging through your lawyer this, it has not ended. Despite the moment so dark that we are living, trusting the appeal process, and in which the truth will open. Way as expected, entertainment industry did not take long in feeding the storm. A producer with decades on television, he released the phrase that many thought, but few. They dared to say this trial has changed completely the way they are perceived. Realities is no longer about interesting. The line between character and real person he has, delete media observers. They began to raise if everything we saw on the screen had been simply a well-acted script, and while experts analyzed the situation in fans, theories of all kinds flourished. Some they argued that they were being victims of a witch hunt. Others believed that the judicial system had wanted to use Rick and Chumley as an example, for scare other celebrities With opaque businesses in any way, legal specialists warned that the appeal process was not going to be fast or simple when journalists directly questioned lawyers on the physical collapse of the defendants in the courtroom. Response was as measured as convenient. What they witnessed was a natural human reaction of two people, innocent, who just received a sentence that they do not consider fair. We are committed to cleaning their names for legal channels corresponding, and thus the legal drama is officially transformed into aerial judicial soap opera with all ingredients to become a Shia legend. Public curiosity did nothing more than grow. The price of the history began to resurface with more strength than ever. Platforms of streaming reported an increase significant in the visualization of ancient episodes. Hundreds of thousands of spectators returned to see the chapters with a new look, as if they would like to discover hidden clues, that gesture of Rick was suspicious. That comment from Chum Lee was a clue. The people analyzed even the slightest detail, looking for indications of a double life that no one knew how to see in time. The case instead to close a stage opened a crack. Deep in the public perception of the fame was no longer about two fallen men in disgrace, but of everything. A system that had been put under them. Magnifying glass. The question that floated in the air, it was disturbing how many other figures, public live hidden behind a mask, perfect built for the screen. What do you think of all this? Do you think just the sentence against the stars of the price of history, or you think they were victims of exaggerated punishment just for being famous? If this story, caught and want to learn more details, dark of what happened after, Bambalins with Rick Harrison and Chumley, give it like the video, share it with your friends, and leave us your comment. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to Nut. You miss the next stories that they will leave with their mouths open. Men.